I'd like to introduce Dr. Peter Watson, who is an outstanding individual. Grew up in New Zealand, Australia, and we know everyone from Australia is outstanding. He lived in China, Russia, South Africa, took a doctorate at McGill, and later served on the White House, the White House office as Director of Asia and Africa Trade. He was asked to be that was the National Security Council. He was then asked to be the chairman of the U.S. International Trade Organization, and later served as the president and CEO of the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, and under 4 administrations. And to give you an idea of the size of the impact of Peter's work on world communities, there was a great deal of homelessness about 20 years ago in South Africa, and builders weren't able to get sufficient funding to build low-income housing. Peter arranged for a revolving credit system and provided initial funding, which has now created 370,000 homes to house 2.5 million South Africans. This is one of his initiatives. A second initiative was providing insurance to prevent foreclosures of mortgages for families where the father died of HIV/AIDS. And Peter's done work like this all around the world, and we're very honored this evening to have him to say a few words about Prime Minister Michael Moore, who could not be here tonight, and to receive in his place the award. Peter, could you come up?
What a remarkable gathering here this evening, and I'm so pleased that Dee Dee and I are able to join you, if only as a surrogate for Prime Minister Mike Moore and his really remarkable wife Yvonne, who are able to be in a stage of recovery, frankly, by reason of the very dedicated care that Fraser has been able to bring to bear in his case. Mike suffered a stroke early April of this year, but for the care that your community, through the type of skill that Fraser has been able to bring, we would have actually likely lost an extraordinary humanitarian who has graced our lives. The Prime Minister wasn't Prime Minister for very long, he'll tell you that himself, but he comes from a remarkable, humble background, and a person who has very disarming wit and charm, a person who we would all be very thrilled, frankly, to spend time with, and as I have, my wife Dee Dee has, and as Yvonne. It's very difficult to talk about the Prime Minister. As Director General of the World Trade Organization, he was responsible for bringing hundreds of millions of new people into the international economic freedom that comes with that, China and the Doha round, but not just those countries, the knock-on benefits that came to all of us as consumers here, and lower middle class people who could afford to send their children with clothing to school. And these are the type of remarkable people that we've been so privileged to be amongst. And Mike is the epitome of that type of person, and I've been deeply honored over the years to get to know Mike. I think of it as an older brother, and he thinks of me as an older brother, so I think we might leave it at that. But it's difficult also to talk about a fellow New Zealander, particularly in an audience mostly of North Americans, So I'd like to actually just give a little bit of an insight, perhaps that may be more useful. E.B. White, of course, well-known writer here in a different era, wrote about Harold Ross, from the famous editor of the New Yorker. And Mike is a little bit like Ross in the way that E.B. talks about him. Mike, as so many folks in New Zealand, did not finish high school, although he went on to do great things. So as E.B. said of Ross, some people found Ross's scholastic deficiencies quite appalling, and were not sure that they'd met the right man. But he was the right man. And the only question was whether the other fellow was capable of being tuned into Ross's vibration. Ross had a thing that is least as good as, and sometimes better than, knowledge. He had a natural drive in the right direction, plus a complete respect for the ideas and opinions of others. It took a little while to get onto the fact Ross, more violently than almost anybody, was proceeding in a good direction and carrying others along with him under torrential conditions. He was like a boat being driven at the mercy of some internal squall, a disturbance he himself only half understood, and of which he was at times suspicious. I couldn't think of a better way of framing Mike, and I suspect that he might even agree with that reference. I'd like to just also capture the personality of the person you're honoring this evening, and you couldn't do better to include him in your class of honorees, because I know the types of things that you're seeking to do to alleviate the suffering and the many difficulties in your discipline. And Mike, in his own way, has done that with Yvonne's support. And Mike does this in such a humble way, and he doesn't at all remind you of a politician, because he never feels, and this is a quote from E.B. White again, to describe the American liberal, a classic definition of the Mike Moores of the world who we celebrate tonight. He says, unlike professional politicians, he never feels he knows where the truth lies, but is full of rich memories of places he has glimpsed in it. And we are fortunate to have the pioneering and the guidance of peoples whose shoulders we stand on, who we can also see in the direction that they take us to, that we can see where the truth lies, and the memories in the places that we've been able to visit with them through the type of support that you're providing in your own community. So on a very humble way, may I thank you very much for honoring Prime Minister Mike Moore and Yvonne, if I could say that.